My name is Elizabeth Avery Calloway. I am 38 years old, and I live in the Hillrest Drive mansion. The gavel hit the wood block. It sounded like a gunshot ending my life. I stood frozen in the courtroom. The judge looked at a stack of papers and spoke in a flat, bored voice. The property at 2247 Hillrest Drive is awarded to the respondent. Custody is revoked. Supervised visitation only. My knees felt weak. I gripped the edge of the table to stay standing. I looked across the aisle. My ex-husband was there. He didn't look sad. He didn't look relieved. He just smirked at me. It was a small, cruel smile that said I won. In 10 seconds, I lost everything. My childhood home was gone. My children were taken away from me. My identity as a mother was shattered. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing but a thin manila folder of court orders and a heavy feeling in my chest. I had been outplayed. I had been tricked. I thought it was over. I thought he had buried me. But he made one mistake. He didn't know about unit number 117. He didn't know about the dusty box in my late father's storage locker. And he certainly didn't know about the envelope inside that was about to burn his entire victory to the ground. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Elizabeth Avery Calloway. I am 38 years old. Everything started 10 years ago. That was when my world changed for the first time. I was 28 years old. I was happy, or I thought I was. Then my father died. His name was Arthur Avery. He was a tall man who wore gray suits every day. He was an estate attorney. He was very strict, but he loved me. He was the kind of man who checked the locks on the doors 3 times before bed. He believed in rules. He believed in paper. When he passed away from a heart attack, I was devastated. I felt like I had lost my anchor, but he had planned for everything. He left me the house. The house at 2247 Hillrest Drive. It was a mansion. It was worth $3.5 million. It had tall columns in the front and a garden filled with roses. It was where I grew up. It was my home. My father left it to me in a special way. It was called an irrevocable separate property trust. I didn't understand all the legal words back then. I just sat in his leather chair in his study, crying, while his law partner read the will. "Elizabeth," the partner said, "your father wanted to make sure you were safe. This house is yours. It belongs to you, not to any husband you might have in the future. It is separate." I remember my father's voice in my head. He used to tap his finger on his desk. "Elizabeth," he would say, "paper beats memory. Always, people forget. People lie, but paper never changes. Keep your records." I nodded. I thought I understood. I put the documents in a box and tried to move on with my life. A year later, I met Richard. Richard was everything my father wasn't. He was loud and funny. He smiled with his whole face. He bought me flowers for no reason. He listened to me when I talked about my art. He made me feel special. We got married in the garden of the Hillrest mansion. It was a beautiful day. I wore a white dress that trailed on the grass. Richard looked handsome in his tuxedo. He held my hands and promised to love me forever. I believed him. But things changed slowly. It wasn't sudden. It was like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice it until you are driving on the rim. First, it was the bank accounts. "Why do we have separate money?" Richard asked one night over dinner. "We are partners, Liz. We should share everything. It shows we trust each other." It made sense. I wanted to be a good wife, so I merged our checking accounts. Then it was my friends. "Sarah is always so negative," Richard said after we came home from a party. "She makes you sad. I don't like how she talks to you. Maybe you should take a break from her." I thought he was protecting me. I thought he cared about my feelings. So I stopped calling Sarah. Then I stopped calling my other friends. Soon it was just me and Richard. Then came the subtle guilt. If I bought a new dress, he would sigh. He wouldn't yell. He would just look worried. "Are you sure we can afford that?" he would ask, even though we had plenty of money. "We need to be careful. I'm just thinking about our future." I started to feel guilty for spending my own money. I started to ask him for permission. I didn't see the trap. I was busy being a wife. Then, I was busy being a mother. We had 2 children, Leo and Maya. They were my whole world. I spent my days taking them to the park, cooking their meals, and reading them stories. I was tired, but I was happy. Meanwhile, Richard was busy too. But he wasn't busy with work. He was busy studying my inheritance. He asked questions about the house. He asked about the trust. He wanted to see the paperwork. "I just want to organize things," he said. "I want to make sure the kids are secure." I trusted him. I showed him where I kept the files in the home office. I let him handle the taxes. I let him talk to the accountants. I didn't know that he was looking for a loophole. I didn't know he was planning a war. I was living in a dream. I thought we were a team. I didn't know I was sleeping next to an enemy who was waiting for the right moment to strike. The cracks in our marriage turned into holes. Then the holes turned into a canyon. Richard stopped being charming. He became cold. He criticized everything I did. The food was too salty. The house was too messy. The kids were too loud. One night in the kitchen, the truth finally came out. I want a divorce, he said. He was cutting a steak. He didn't even look up. I froze. I was holding a dish towel. What? I'm not happy, he said. I haven't been happy for a long time, and I want the house. I dropped the towel. The house? This is my house. My father left it to me. Richard looked at me then. His eyes were dark. We've lived here for 8 years, Liz. I've paid for repairs. I've paid the taxes. It's marital property now, and I'm going to take it. You can't, I said. My voice was shaking. It's in a trust. We'll see, he said. The war began the next day. I thought the truth would matter. I thought the courts would be fair. I was wrong. Richard didn't just want the house. He wanted to destroy me so I couldn't fight back. He wanted to make sure I had no money and no credibility. He started the lies. He told our neighbors that I was drinking. He told the school teachers that I was unstable. He told our friends that I was having a breakdown. Then came the legal assault. We went to court. I sat there with my lawyer, a nice woman named Karen. She told me not to worry. But Richard had a shark for a lawyer. They produced evidence I had never seen before. Your Honor, Richard's lawyer said. We have notes here from Mrs. Calloway's therapist. They detail severe anger issues and resentment toward the children. I stood up. That's a lie. I never said those things. The judge banged the gavel. Sit down, Mrs. Calloway. I looked at the paper. It was on letterhead from a therapist I had seen once for grief counseling after my dad died. But the words were all wrong. It said I fantasized about hurting my family. I didn't write this, I whispered. Then came the journal. Richard produced a black notebook. This is Elizabeth's journal, his lawyer said. She details her plans to abandon the family. They read entries aloud. The handwriting looked like mine. But the words were twisted. It sounded like a monster wrote it. I felt sick. I looked at Richard. He was looking at the table, pretending to be sad. But the worst part was the children. They called a child specialist to the stand. The specialist had interviewed Leo and Maya. The children are afraid of their mother, the specialist said. Leo stated that Mommy screams at night and throws things. Maya said Mommy hurts Daddy. My heart stopped. My beautiful children. They had been coached, I knew it. Richard had spent weeks whispering in their ears, scaring them, telling them what to say. That's not true, I cried silently. Tears ran down my face. By day 3 of the trial, I was exhausted. My lawyer, Karen, looked worried. We need the original trust deed, Karen said. The copy we have isn't clear about the separate property clause. Richard's lawyer is arguing that because you used joint funds for repairs, the trust was broken. I have it, I said. It's in the home office. We looked, Karen said. It's gone, Elizabeth. Richard had taken it. He had scrubbed the house clean of any proof that the mansion was mine. The judgment day came. You know how that ended. The judge believed him. The judge believed the fake journal. The judge believed the lies. I lost the house. I lost custody. I had 48 hours to vacate the property. I packed my clothes into trash bags. I didn't have suitcases. Richard watched me from the doorway of the master bedroom. Leave the keys on the counter, he said. I slept in a cheap motel that night. The room smelled like old cigarettes and bleach. The neon sign outside buzzed all night. I lay on the lumpy mattress and stared at the ceiling. I had an eviction notice on the nightstand. I had lost my children. I had lost my home. I had lost my father's legacy. I felt like I was drowning. I wanted to give up. I closed my eyes and wished I wouldn't wake up. I woke up the next morning to the sound of a car alarm outside. The sun was coming through the thin curtains. I sat up. My head hurt. I felt empty. I looked at the few boxes I had managed to bring with me. They were mostly old clothes and some books. I thought about my father. I thought about what he would say if he saw me now. He would be disappointed. He had given me a fortress, and I had let the enemy walk right in. Paper beats memory. The phrase echoed in my mind. Paper beats memory. Wait, my father was paranoid. He was careful. He never kept important things in the house. He always said houses could burn down. Houses could be robbed. He kept his most important files somewhere else. I closed my eyes, trying to remember. It was 10 years ago. After the funeral, we cleared out his office. There were boxes. Lots of boxes. Most of them went to the trash, but some went to a storage unit. Unit number 117. I hadn't been there in years. I paid the bill automatically every month from my personal account, the one small account Richard hadn't touched because it was so small. I grabbed my keys. I didn't even brush my hair. I drove my old sedan to the edge of town. The storage facility was a row of orange metal doors. It was dusty and hot. I found unit number 117. My hands were shaking as I tried to put the key in the lock. What if Richard had been here too? What if he had emptied this too? The lock clicked. I pulled the metal door up. It rattled loud in the quiet morning. Inside, the air was stale. Dust motes danced in the light. It was full of boxes, old furniture, my father's law books, a broken lamp. I started digging. I threw boxes aside. I coughed as the dust filled my lungs. "Please," I whispered. "Please be here." I found a box labeled Taxes 1999. Useless. I found a box labeled Elizabeth High School. Useless. I sat back on my heels, sweating. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was nothing here. Then I saw it. Underneath a heavy crate of vinyl records, there was a gray plastic bin. It had a piece of masking tape on the side. It was my father's handwriting. Sharp, jagged letters. Estate final. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled the bin out. I snapped the lid off. Inside were hanging folders, neatly organized. I flipped through them. Insurance, burial plot, will, and then trust deed recorded original. I pulled the file out. I opened it. There it was. The thick, heavy paper. It had a gold seal on the bottom. It was the original deed to the house. I read the text. I wasn't a lawyer, but the language was clear. This property is transferred to Elizabeth Avery Calloway as her sole and separate property. No marital interest shall ever attach to this asset, regardless of commingling of funds or improvements made during marriage. It was dated and notarized 3 years before I ever met Richard. I held the paper to my chest. I started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Richard had lied to the court. He told the judge there was no clear language excluding him. He relied on a photocopy that was missing the last page. But I had the original. I wasn't done yet. I looked back into the box. My father had kept everything. But there was something else in the bin, a stack of papers that didn't look like legal documents. They looked like emails. I frowned. Why would my father have emails? I picked them up. They weren't my father's. They were dated from 7 years ago. Then I remembered. Years ago, when Richard and I first got married, we were moving things around. I had printed out a bunch of documents from our home computer to back them up before we wiped the hard drive. I had shoved them into a folder and put them in this bin for safekeeping, thinking they were just tax records. I had completely forgotten about them. I looked at the top page. It was an email from Richard to Gary, his brother. I started to read, and as I read, my blood turned to ice. I sat on the dusty concrete floor of the storage unit. The only sound was the buzzing of a fly. I read the emails one by one. It was like reading a script for a horror movie, but the movie was my life. The emails were between Richard and his brother, Gary. Gary was a failed businessman. He always had a new scheme that lost money. The first email was dated 6 months after Richard and I got married. From Gary to Richard, subject, debt Rick, I'm in trouble. The loan sharks are calling. I owe $480,000. If I don't pay in 2 years, I'm dead. You have to help me. I turned the page. Richard's reply. From Richard to Gary, subject, Ray, debt, calm down. I'm working on it. The wife has a trust. The house is worth millions, but it's locked up tight. Her old man was smart. I can't just touch it. I felt sick. He called me the wife. Not Elizabeth, not his love, just the wife. I read the next one. From Richard to Gary, subject, the plan, I have a plan. It's going to take time. I need to establish marital interest. I'm going to start paying for repairs from our joint account. I need to isolate her, make her depend on me. Once the house is in my name, we can take out a loan against it and pay off your debt. The house alone is worth the wait. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. He had planned it. He had planned the isolation. He had planned the joint accounts. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about partnership. It was a heist. I turned to the next email. This one was about the kids. From Richard to Gary, subject. Custody, if we divorce, I need full custody to get the house. If she has the kids, the judge might let her stay. I need to make her look unstable. I've started a journal. I'm writing things in it every week. Fake stuff, abuse, yelling. By the time I use it, it will look like years of evidence. There it was, the journal. He admitted it. He admitted forging the journal years before he even filed for divorce. Keep the journal updated, Gary had replied. Add emotional details. Make sure you mention the kids being scared. And the final email, dated just a few months ago, right before he asked for the divorce. From Richard to Gary subject, Showtime, it's time, she's weak. She has no friends left, I've coached the kids. They know what to say, we're going to crush her, Gary, and then we'll have the money. I put the papers down. I felt a cold rage spreading through my body. It replaced the sadness. It replaced the fear. They had used my children as pawns. They had used my love as a weapon. They had stolen years of my life for money. Richard wasn't just a bad husband. He was a criminal. He had committed fraud. He had committed perjury. And I held the proof in my hands. I stood up. I brushed the dust off my jeans. I looked at the manila folder with the deed and the stack of emails. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness, and I was the prosecutor. I grabbed the box. I walked out of the storage unit and into the sunlight. I walked to my car. I didn't look back. I had work to do. I had to find a forensic expert. I had to call my lawyer. Richard thought the game was over. He thought he had won. But he didn't know the rule my father taught me. Paper beats memory, and I had a lot of paper. I sat in the driver's seat of my old sedan, the engine idling. The air conditioning was broken, and the heat of the storage unit facility was starting to bake the inside of the car, but I was shivering. I was freezing cold from the inside out. On the passenger seat next to me sat the plastic bin. It looked so ordinary. It was a gray, dusty tub that you could buy at any hardware store for $5. But inside that tub was my life. Inside that tub was the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. I stared at the manila folder on top, the emails, the draft journal. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't grip the steering wheel. I had to sit on them to make them stop. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I looked in the rearview mirror. I was paranoid now. I checked for Richard's black SUV. I checked for his brother Gary's car. I felt like I was being watched. For the last year, Richard had been 5 steps ahead of me. He knew what I was going to say before I said it. He knew my bank balance. He knew my schedule. He had anticipated every move I made in court and blocked it. But he didn't know about this. He didn't know about unit number 117. This was the one variable he hadn't calculated. I put the car in gear and drove. I didn't go home. I didn't have a home anymore, just that sad motel room. I didn't go to my parents' old house. I drove straight to Karen's office. Karen was my lawyer. She was a good woman, tough and smart, but she was tired. We had lost so badly in the last hearing that I think she had given up hope. She was representing me on a payment plan because she knew my accounts were frozen, but I could tell she thought it was a lost cause. I burst into her reception area. I didn't wait for the secretary to announce me. I walked straight back to Karen's office. She was on the phone, rubbing her temples. When she saw me, she frowned and covered the mouthpiece. "Elizabeth, I'm on a call. You can't just—" "Hang up," I said. My voice was hoarse. "Hang up the phone, Karen." She looked at my face. She saw something there, maybe the desperation, maybe the fire that made her listen. She murmured an apology into the phone and set the receiver down. "What is it?" she asked. "Has he filed another motion? Did he stop the visitation?" I didn't say a word. I dropped the heavy box onto her polished mahogany desk. Dust puffed up into the air. I pulled out the trust deed first. I slid it across the desk. "Read it," I said. Karen put on her glasses. She picked up the document. She scanned it quickly, her eyes moving back and forth. Then she stopped. She leaned in closer. She ran her thumb over the gold seal at the bottom. "This is the original," she whispered. "The embossed seal, the notary stamp from 20 years ago." "Read the clause on page 4, I said. She flipped the page. She read it aloud, her voice quiet. "Shall remain the sole and separate property of Elizabeth Avery, regardless of any future marital union, commingling of funds, or joint usage. No marital interest shall attach." She looked up at me, her mouth slightly open. "Elizabeth, the copy Richard submitted to the court. It didn't have this page. It stopped at page 3. He claimed the rest was lost." "He lied," I said, "but that's not the worst part." I reached into the box and pulled out the stack of emails. The correspondence between Richard and his brother Gary, the blueprint of my destruction. He didn't just want the house, Karen. He needed it. His brother is in debt to loan sharks. They planned this. They planned the marriage. They planned the divorce. They plan to take my children away just to get leverage on the property. Karen took the emails. She read them slowly. I watched her face change. It went from confused to shocked, and then to angry, a deep, professional anger. Once the house is in my name, the kids won't remember her, she read from one of the emails. She looked up at me, disgusted. He actually wrote this. Yes, I said. But wait, there's one more thing. I pulled out the blue folder. The one with the spiral notebook inside. The draft journal. This was the piece of evidence that made me feel sickest. This was the proof that my mental instability was nothing more than a creative writing project for him. You remember the journal he submitted? I asked. The one where I supposedly wrote about wanting to hurt the kids. Of course, Karen said. That was the piece of evidence that lost us custody. The judge said it showed a disturbed mind. Look at this. I opened the notebook to a page covered in red ink. It was Richard's handwriting. I knew the slant of his letters. I knew the way he crossed his T's note to self. Make this entry sound more frantic. Use short sentences. Say she broke a glass. And below that in his handwriting, draft 1, I am so angry at Leo. Draft 2, final, I hate Leo. I want to throw him against the wall. Karen stared at the page. She was silent for a long time. The air conditioning in the office hummed. He drafted it, she said finally. He workshopped your insanity. He wrote it, edited it, and then forged it in your handwriting in the final book. Can we prove it? I asked. I know it's his handwriting in the margins, but can we prove he wrote the fake journal entries? Karen slammed the notebook shut. She stood up. She looked like a warrior now. The fatigue was gone. We aren't just going to prove it, Elizabeth. We are going to crucify him with it. I'm calling Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a forensic document examiner. He was a small man who worked out of a basement lab that smelled like vinegar and chemicals. He didn't talk much. He just looked at things through giant microscopes. We brought him everything. The original trust deed, the emails, the fake journal Richard submitted to court, and the draft notebook I had found with the red ink. The wait was agonizing. It took 3 days. For 3 days I sat in my motel room. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the phone. I kept thinking about the kids, Leo and Maya. They were with him. They were in that house. Was he writing more lies about them right now? Was he telling them I didn't love them? Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, Karen called. Come to the office, she said. The report is in. I drove over. I felt like I was driving to my own execution or my salvation. I didn't know which one it would be. Mr. Henderson was there, sitting in a chair in Karen's office. He had a thick packet of paper in his lap. Mrs. Calloway, he said, nodding to me. Tell me, I said. He opened the packet. It's conclusive. He laid out photos on the desk. They were magnified images of ink strokes. First, the journal, Henderson said. The journal submitted to the court. The evidence of your instability was not written over a period of 5 years as your ex-husband claimed. Ink dating analysis shows that all the entries were written within a 3-week window, approximately 6 months ago. The chemical composition of the ink is identical on every page, from 2018 to 2024. He sat down and wrote 5 years of fake memories in less than a month. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wasn't crazy. He had made it all up. Second, Henderson continued, the pressure mapping. When people write naturally, the pressure varies. When people forge or copy text, they press harder. The pressure on the submitted journal is heavy and consistent. It matches the muscle memory of the handwriting found in the margins of the draft notebook, your ex-husband's handwriting. So he wrote it? I asked. He wrote it, Henderson confirmed. There is no doubt. It is a clumsy but extensive forgery. And the trust deed? Karen asked. Authentic, Henderson said. Paper fiber analysis dates it to 20 years ago. The notary seal is legitimate. The signature is your father's. Karen looked at me. She was smiling. Elizabeth, she said, in law we call this fraud upon the court. It is one of the most serious things you can do. It's not just lying. It's attacking the integrity of the justice system. What does that mean for us? I asked. Karen leaned back in her chair. She tapped a pen on the desk, a sound that reminded me of my father. Paper beats memory. It means, Karen said, that we have him. We have him on perjury, we have him on fraud, we have him on theft, and we have him on conspiracy. She looked at the emails again. He wanted a war, Karen said softly. He wanted to destroy you so completely that you couldn't fight back. He thought you were weak. He thought you were just a housewife who didn't know where the files were. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably drinking a scotch, thinking he had won. He was probably looking at real estate listings, planning how to spend the money from my father's house. He had no idea that the ground was about to open up beneath his feet. "I'm ready," I said to the window. I turned back to Karen. "I want my kids back. I want my house back. And I want him to admit what he did." Karen opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Let's draft the motions," she said. "We're not going to give him a warning. We're going to drop the hammer." The strategy was simple. Shock and awe. Karen explained that we couldn't just file a normal appeal. Appeals take months, sometimes years. We didn't have years. Gary's debt was due in 6 months, which meant Richard would try to sell or mortgage the house immediately. We had to stop the clock. We spent the next 12 hours in Karen's office. We drank stale coffee and ate takeout Chinese food while we built the case. We created 3 separate legal weapons to fire at once. Weapon 1. The emergency motion to vacate judgment. This was the big one. We were asking the judge to throw out her entire previous ruling. We attached Henderson's forensic report as Exhibit A. We attached the side-by-side comparison of the fake journal and the red ink draft. We used words like malicious fabrication and perjury. Weapon 2. The ex parte application for custody. Ex parte means emergency. It means you don't wait for a scheduled hearing. You go to the judge now because the children are in danger. We argued that a man willing to psychologically abuse his wife and forge documents to frame her was an immediate danger to the children. We argued that his coaching of the children, proven by the emails, was emotional abuse. Weapon 3. The quiet title action. This was the financial trap. We filed a lawsuit claiming that the title to the house was in dispute. As soon as this is filed with the county recorder, a lease pendens is placed on the property. It's a big red flag to every bank and buyer in the world. It means, do not touch this house. It is under lawsuit. Karen hit submit on the court's electronic filing system at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Then we waited. The reaction was faster than I expected. At 10:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. "What the hell did you just file? My realtor just called me. He says the listing is flagged." I stared at the screen. My heart hammered, but I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another text. "You're pathetic, Elizabeth. You're just wasting money you don't have. You think a few papers are going to change the judge's mind. She already hates you." He was trying to scare me. He was trying to use the old triggers. But they didn't work anymore. I knew something he didn't know. I knew the judge didn't hate me. The judge hated liars. At 11 a.m. the emails started. Richard forwarded me an email from Gary. I don't think he meant to. He was panicking, hitting buttons. From Gary to Richard. Subject. The bank called Rick. The loan officer said there's a cloud on the title. They can't process the home equity line of credit. I have guys coming to my house on Friday. You promised this would be done. Fix it. She's ruining everything. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. They were suffocating. The money they were counting on, my father's money, my children's inheritance, was locked inside a vault, and I had just swallowed the key. But Richard wasn't going to go down without a dirty fight. When he realized the legal wall was holding, he turned to his favorite tactic: social pressure. I went to the grocery store that afternoon to buy some fruit. I was standing in the checkout line when I saw Mrs. Gable. She was the mother of one of Leo's friends. She used to come to my house for coffee. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She pulled her cart back. "I heard about what you're doing," she said loudly. People turned to look. "Excuse me," I said. "Richard told us," she said, shaking her head. "Dragging those poor children back into court, making up stories about forged journals. He said you're having a relapse. It's shameful, Elizabeth. You should let them have some peace." My face burned. Everyone was staring at me. The cashier stopped scanning items. Richard had gotten to them first. He had spun the narrative. He told everyone I was manic, that I was filing frivolous lawsuits because I couldn't let go. In the past, I would have cried. I would have run out of the store. I would have called Richard and begged him to stop. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I looked at Mrs. Gable. I looked her right in the eye. "He lied to you, Brenda," I said. My voice was steady. "Just like he lied to the court. And when the truth comes out next week, you're going to feel very embarrassed for saying this to me." I paid for my apples. I walked out with my head high, but inside I was shaking. It is hard to stand alone when the whole world thinks you are the villain. Wednesday came. The court clerk called Karen. "Judge Miller has reviewed the emergency filing," Karen told me over the phone. "She's granting an expedited hearing." Friday morning, 9 a.m. Is that good? I asked. It's very good, Karen said. Usually, they set these things out for weeks. If she wants to see us in 2 days, it means she read the evidence. She's interested. Thursday night was the longest night of my life. I sat on the edge of my bed in the motel. I had my suit hanging on the doorframe. It was my navy blue suit, the one I wore to my father's funeral. It made me feel strong. I took out the picture of my kids I kept in my wallet. Leo and Maya smiling at the beach 2 years ago, before the drama, before the lies. I'm coming, I whispered to the photo. Mommy is coming. My phone buzzed again. It was Richard. He was calling. I watched the screen light up. Richard calling. I knew why he was calling. He wanted to make a deal. He wanted to offer me a settlement. Maybe he'd offer me some cash to drop the fraud charges. Maybe he'd threaten me. I didn't answer. I turned the phone off. I didn't want a deal. I didn't want cash. I wanted the truth to be spoken out loud. I wanted the stain he had put on my name to be washed away. I lay down in the dark. I closed my eyes and practiced my breathing. Inhale, paper beats memory. Exhale, truth beats lies. I thought about the courtroom. I thought about Judge Miller. She was a terrifying woman. She had looked at me with such disdain during the first trial. She had called me an unfit mother. Changing her mind would be like turning an ocean liner. It would take immense force. But I had the force. I had the box. I fell asleep dreaming of my father. In the dream, he was standing in his study holding the trust deed. He didn't say anything. He just nodded at me. He looked proud. When I woke up, the sun was shining. It was Friday. The day of reckoning. I showered, dressed, and drove to the courthouse. I met Karen on the steps. She was carrying the heavy black binder of evidence. It looked like a weapon. Ready? She asked. Ready, I said. We walked through the metal detectors. We walked down the long marble hallway. We walked into Department 4. Richard was already there. He was sitting with his lawyer. He looked tired. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. When I walked in, he looked up. For the first time in our entire marriage, I didn't see arrogance in his eyes. I didn't see pity. I saw fear. He knew I had found the storage unit. He knew the game was up. But he was trapped. He had to play it out. I sat down at my table. I placed my hands on the smooth wood. I looked at the empty judge's bench. Bring it on, I thought. The bailiff stood up. All rise. Department 4 is now in session. The Honorable Judge Miller presiding. The door opened. The judge walked in. Her robe swished around her. She didn't look at the lawyers. She didn't look at the audience. She sat down, opened the file, and looked straight at Richard. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the silence before a storm. Judge Miller adjusted her glasses. She picked up a piece of paper, our motion. We are here, she said, her voice cutting through the air, on an emergency motion regarding allegations of fraud, perjury, and the fabrication of evidence. She paused. Mr. Calloway, she said, you better have a very good explanation, because what I am reading here is disturbing. The hearing had begun. And this time I wasn't the victim. I was the prosecutor. Karen stood up. She didn't look at Richard. She looked straight at Judge Miller. Your Honor, Karen said. Her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. This is not a standard custody modification. This is an exposure of a criminal conspiracy. Judge Miller leaned back in her leather chair. She took off her glasses. Proceed. Karen walked to the evidence table. She picked up the heavy black binder we had prepared. She handed a copy to the bailiff to give to the judge, and another copy to Richard's lawyer. Richard's lawyer opened it. I saw his face go pale. He leaned over and whispered frantically to Richard. Richard stared at the page and his jaw tightened. We have 3 exhibits, Karen said. I would like to direct the court's attention to the screen. Karen turned on the overhead projector. A beam of light hit the white screen on the wall. Exhibit A, Karen said. The image of the trust deed appeared. It was huge. The gold seal looked like a sun. This is the original deed, Karen explained. Found in the late Arthur Avery's storage unit. If you look at page 4, which was conveniently missing from the copy Mr. Calloway submitted to this court last year, you will see the separate property clause. Karen read it aloud. No marital interest shall attach. The judge looked at the binder, then at the screen. She turned to Richard's lawyer. Counsel, the judge said, why did your client submit an incomplete document during the divorce trial? Richard's lawyer stood up. He was sweating. Your Honor, my client, simply provided what he found in the home files. We were not aware there were missing pages. My client was the executor of the estate, Richard blurted out. He couldn't help himself. She should have known. Quiet, the judge snapped. Karen didn't wait. She clicked the button for the next slide. Exhibit B, she said. The motivation. The emails appeared. The font was large and black against the white screen. From Richard to Gary. Subject, the plan. I have to isolate her. Make her depend on me. Once the house is in my name, we can take out a loan against it and pay off your debt. A murmur went through the courtroom. The court reporter paused her typing for a split second, then continued furiously. This email, Karen said, pointing to the screen, is dated 6 months into the marriage. Mr. Calloway was not building a life. He was planning a heist. Richard sank lower in his chair. He wasn't smirking anymore. He looked small. He looked like a trapped animal. And finally, Karen said, Exhibit C. The smoking gun. She put the image of the draft journal on the screen. On the left side was the page Richard had submitted to the court months ago, the one that claimed I was violent. On the right side was the page I found in the blue folder, the draft with the red ink. The red ink looked like blood on the screen. Make this sound dangerous, the note in the margin read. Use the kids' names. Say she scared them. The courtroom went completely silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Karen turned to the judge. Mr. Calloway didn't just lie, Your Honor. He wrote a script. He drafted my client's mental breakdown. He edited it like a novel. And then he forged the final copy to steal her children. Judge Miller stared at the screen for a long time. Her face was unreadable. She was a mother too. I knew that. I wondered what she was feeling. Finally, she looked down at Richard. Her eyes were cold. Mr. Calloway, she said, take the stand. Richard stood up. His legs were shaky. He walked to the witness box. He sat down. You are under oath, the judge said. Did you write the notes in red ink? Richard looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked down at his table, refusing to make eye contact. The lawyer knew the ship was sinking. I was just venting, Richard stammered. I was angry. It's not what it looks like. Did you forge the journal entries? The judge asked. Her voice was getting louder. No, I rewrote them from memory, Richard said. She really did those things. I just fixed the dates. You fixed 5 years of dates in 1 week? The judge asked. According to the forensic report, you wrote the entire journal in January of this year. Richard didn't answer. He wiped sweat from his forehead. And the emails? The judge asked. Did you plan to sell the house to pay your brother's gambling debt? It was a business loan, Richard yelled. And it's my house too. I lived there. I fixed the roof. It was never your house, the judge said. She slammed her hand on the desk. And those children are not your pawns. She looked at me. Mrs. Calloway, she said, stand up. I stood up. My knees were knocking together, but I held my head high. The court owes you an apology, Judge Miller said. We failed you. We allowed a manipulator to weaponize the legal system against you. But today, the record gets set straight. The judge didn't take a recess. She didn't need time to think. She grabbed her pen and started writing orders. The previous judgment regarding the property at 2247 Hillrest Drive is vacated immediately, she announced. Her voice was sharp and final. The property is confirmed as the sole and separate property of Elizabeth Avery Calloway. Mr. Calloway, you have until 6 p.m. tonight to remove your personal effects. You are not to take a single item of furniture, art, or documentation. If you damage one wall, I will hold you in contempt. I let out a breath. The house was mine. My father's legacy was safe. Regarding custody, the judge continued. My heart stopped. This was the only thing that really mattered. The previous custody order was based on fraudulent evidence, the judge said. Therefore, it is void. Full physical and legal custody is returned to the mother, effective immediately. I covered my mouth with my hand to stop a sob from escaping. Mr. Calloway, the judge said, looking at Richard with disgust. Your visitation rights are suspended. You will undergo a full psychiatric evaluation. And given the evidence of fraud and perjury, I am referring this transcript to the district attorney's office. You may be facing criminal charges. Richard put his head in his hands. He was crying now. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was a whimpering sound. He had lost everything. The house, the money, the control, the kids. Bailiff, the judge said, please escort Mr. Calloway out of the building. Ensure he does not approach the petitioner. 2 bailiffs moved toward Richard. He stood up slowly. He looked at me one last time. There was no hate left in his eyes, just shock. He couldn't believe his plan had failed. He couldn't believe the weak wife had beaten him. I didn't look away. I watched him walk out. He looked small. Then the back doors of the courtroom opened. The social worker walked in. Behind her were Leo and Maya. They had been waiting in the secure witness room. They didn't know the details, but they knew something big was happening. Leo looked at me. He was 12, trying to be a man, but he looked so young. He looked scared. The social worker leaned down and whispered to him. I saw his eyes get wide. She told him he was coming home with me. He looked across the room. He saw his father's empty chair. He saw me standing there, crying silent tears. He walked up to the wooden railing that separated the public from the court. Mom, he whispered. I walked over. I fell to my knees so I could be at his level. I'm here, Leo, I said. I'm here, Dad said. Dad said you didn't want us, Leo said. His voice broke. He said you were sick. He lied, Leo, I said softly. I fought for you every single day. I never stopped wanting you. Not for 1 second. Leo looked at the judge, then back at me. The truth was sinking in. The last year of confusion, of being told to hate me, it was all crumbling. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm sorry I was mean. No, I said, reaching through the railing to grab his hand. Don't you ever apologize. You did nothing wrong. You survived. We both survived. Maya, my little 7-year-old, ran past Leo. She didn't ask questions. She just wanted her mom. She reached over the railing. I stood up and pulled her into my arms. I buried my face in her hair. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood. Mommy, she cried. I held them both. The bailiff, the court reporter, even the stern Judge Miller, they all watched. No one interrupted. Court is adjourned, the judge said softly. She tapped the gavel gently. I walked out of that courthouse holding my children's hands. The sun was shining outside. It was bright and blinding. I had walked in with a box of papers. I walked out with my life. The first night back in the mansion was strange. The house was the same, but it felt different. Richard had changed things. He had painted the kitchen a cold gray. He had moved my father's favorite armchair to the basement, but he was gone. His clothes were gone. His smell was fading. I ordered pizza for the kids. We sat on the living room floor because the dining table felt too formal. It wasn't a magical, happily ever after right away. The damage was deep. That night, Maya had a nightmare. She woke up screaming. I ran into her room. He's coming, she yelled. Daddy's mad. I held her until she stopped shaking. He's not coming, baby. The judge said he can't come here. You are safe, I promise. Leo was different. He was quiet. He stayed in his room a lot. A few days later, I found him in the garage. He was looking at a box of old baseball gear his dad had bought him. Do I have to throw this away? He asked me. I looked at him. I saw the conflict in his eyes. Richard was a monster to me, but he was still Leo's father. Leo missed the dad he thought he had. No, I said gently. You don't have to throw anything away. You can keep the good memories, Leo. You can love the parts of him that were good to you, but we have to be safe from the parts that were bad. He nodded. He understood. Week by week, we healed. I hired painters. We painted the kitchen yellow, bright, sunny yellow. We brought my father's chair back up from the basement and put it by the fireplace. I spent hours in the garden. I pulled up the weeds that had grown while I was gone. I planted new roses. It felt like I was weeding my own soul, pulling out the doubt, planting fresh hope. One afternoon, I was walking down the hallway and stopped in front of the empty space on the wall where Richard used to hang a mirror. I went to my bedroom and got the trust deed. I had put it in a simple black frame. I hung it on the wall. It wasn't just a legal document anymore. It was a symbol. It was the shield that had protected us. I looked at my father's signature at the bottom, Arthur Avery. Thank you, I whispered. I realized then that I couldn't just go back to my old life. I couldn't just be a mom and an artist. I had learned something too valuable. I had learned that the system destroys women who don't have proof. I started a nonprofit organization. I called it the Avery Project. We started small. I used a spare room in the house as an office. We helped women who were going through high-conflict divorces. We helped them organize their finances. We taught them how to document everything. We taught them that text messages, emails, and receipts are weapons in a war for your children. I would sit with women who were crying, women who were scared just like I had been. He says I'm crazy, a woman told me one day. He says he's going to take the house. I took her hand. Let him say whatever he wants, I told her. We are going to look at the paperwork because paper beats memory, paper beats threats. I watched her straighten her spine. I saw the hope come back into her eyes. 6 months later, on a warm autumn evening, I was sitting on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Leo was in the yard throwing a ball for our new puppy. He was laughing. It was a deep, belly laugh. He didn't look scared anymore. Maya was sitting next to me, drawing in a sketchbook. "Mom," she said. "Look." She showed me her drawing. It was a picture of a big house with a yellow kitchen. There were 3 stick figures holding hands, and a big sun in the corner. "It's us," she said. "It's beautiful," I said. I took a sip of my tea. I looked out at the property. The trees were tall and strong. The house stood behind me, solid and safe. I thought about the journey, the betrayal, the motel room, the dust in the storage unit, the terror of the courtroom. It had almost broken me. But it didn't. I was stronger now. My children were stronger. We knew the truth about ourselves. We knew we were survivors. My father's voice echoed in my mind one last time. "Paper beats memory," I smiled. Yes, paper beats memory. But love beats everything. And I had reclaimed mine. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. I was home, and no one was ever going to take it from me again.